I'm ready.
All right. Rock and roll. All right. We're going to call to order today's meeting of the Red Tape Committee at 3:14 p.m. Madam Clerk, can you please take roll?
Alderwoman Spencer. Vice Chair Oldenburg. Alderman Narayan.
Here.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Here.
Alderwoman Keys.
Here.
Alderwoman Saunier.
Present.
Chair Velasquez.
Present.
Alderwoman Spencer. Vice Chair Oldenburg. We have 5 present. We have a quorum.
Great. Thank you, Madam Clerk. And because we have quorum, I will ask for a motion for the approval of minutes for the meeting of June 10th, 2024.
So move.
Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Alderwoman Spencer. Vice Chair Oldenburg. Alderman Narayan.
Aye.
Chair Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys.
Aye.
Alderwoman Saunier. Chair Velasquez.
Aye.
Alderwoman Spencer. Vice Chair Oldenburg. We have 5 aye votes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And for those of you who are recently joining us, and some of us, I feel like in the studio audience, in the Kennedy Room audience, have been here for our previous meetings where we've had listening sessions on various items related to red tape. But today we'll be hearing a bill from one of our colleagues related to one of the items that we heard specifically about food truck operations and vending. And with that, Alderman Aldridge, would you like to have the floor? You're officially recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Today, I am presenting Board Bill 14 in front of the Special Committee on Red Tape. I will just be having a hearing today, so not calling for a vote. Really want to take this moment. I know this committee has really dived in and had various listening sections around, how do we cut red tape in the city? And one of those conversations was around food truck. There's some of those testimonies that are in the drive can go back, but just want to have a conversation today, get feedback from the committee and any other members and stakeholders of the public on how do we cut some of the red tape around our food truck vendors and the licenses and everything around that. So Board Bill 14, that's in the drive, there's various sections.
I'm sorry, I have no sound. If you can hear me, I have no sound.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
All righty. So I'll just start from the beginning since you wasn't able to hear Alderwoman Keys. So Board Bill 14 is an ongoing conversation that this committee has been having around cutting red tape for our small businesses and different businesses throughout the city of St. Louis. And this board bill focuses on how do we cut red tape around food trucks. So in the bill, there's several sections that we'll be repealing. It's section or chapter 8, but all those sections are 8.108A, 020 all the way to about 0.30. So various sections. I'm not going to go through each section, but I'll highlight each section that is being cut to try to make it easier for food trucks to be able to vend in the city of St. Louis. So the goal of this bill, again, is to eliminate the vending districts, including certain regulations around the downtown vending districts. In front of you all and also in the drive is just a map of the downtown vending districts. There are various vending districts throughout the city, but I wanted to pay close attention to the downtown one a little later to talk about that one. What this bill also would do is extend hours for food truck and any other vendors, sidewalk vendors. From currently it's at 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. It would extend it from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. It also eliminates the district requirements between the licensor vendors and other licensed vendors or businesses. Basically, that would eliminate food trucks being able to operate right outside of a restaurant. Currently, right now, there's 150 feet kind of requirement where a food truck cannot vend outside of a restaurant, and that would eliminate that. Question why eliminate these vending districts? Several years ago, the Board of Aldermen passed a board bill to allow food trucks to operate. And I think the spirit of the bill was good. You know, we try to bring food trucks online. I think food trucks is a great innovative way for people not to just provide food, but we also know getting a brick and mortar sometimes is expensive. So to be able to have a food truck really help entrepreneurship for individuals to move from food trucks to actually a brick and mortar. But when we created that original process and licensee for our food trucks to go through, I think what we heard in this committee, it is very archaic to be able to try to get a license. And this bill doesn't even touch that. I know myself and Alderwoman Velasquez is looking at kind of the licensees of food truck, but the vending districts make it very hard for any food truck to be able to operate, especially in certain areas. It's also important to eliminate these requirements because currently, like I say, by law, they have to be within 150 feet. And in the map that I provided, if you can just look at it, the areas that are blue identifies, so the areas as red is completely non-vendable at all, which is around the convention center and around Busch Stadium. But the areas that are in blue and like that light yellow are where food truck operators cannot vend because of current restaurants. You may see a lot of areas that is in the white area, and you would believe, oh, well, they could be able to vend there. But after talking with Kelly at not SLDC out of the Office of starting up the business in the city of St. Louis, I can't think of the name, but Business Assistance Center, they do great work. She is like literally the expert when it comes to these food trucks because even though some of this stuff is in ordinance, after talking with her and her working with different vendors of food trucks, we figured out even some of these white spots on the map, the departments still tell them they can't operate. If you kind of zoom in very closely on Market Street where you see kind of those yellows, that little bit of white section is where only in the downtown area where food trucks are basically able to operate. There's been a lot of conversations around, you know, if food trucks come, how they will put brick and mortar businesses out. I've been working with the Institute of Justice and also in that FAQ, which is in your drive, there's a link where they did a study to actually show that their food trucks have brought more foot traffic to businesses that are already existing. Not only has it brought more food traffic, it also has brought growth for individuals of color to try to go into businesses from getting a food truck and also going to brick and mortar. We also know a lot of our brick and mortar businesses also have food trucks. So there's this argument that there's going to be competition if you have a food truck right outside a restaurant, and it'll take away from the business. There hasn't been, from other studies, there hasn't been any data that shows that it take away from brick and mortars. I'd also say, you know, some restaurants sit right next door to another restaurant, which could be competition. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is make it easier for our food truck vendors to be able to go out and be able to operate in places where they can have the actual food truck. They pay the $500 fee from the streets department, but they're still regulated in certain places that they're able to go. And I think it's important that we make it easier for our food trucks because food trucks, in my opinion, make neighborhoods more vibrant. When you look at Tower Grove South, in the Tower Grove Park, they have like food truck Fridays or Saturdays. I don't know which one, so I want to misspeak. But it brings a lot of community out. When we have our food truck events from like Juneteenth in St. Louis Place neighborhood, it brings community out. It brings people together. It brings and enhances only our food scene as well. But right now, like I say, there's a lot of burdens where food trucks aren't able to operate because of when we passed the ordinance a very long time ago. We put some very tight regulations around them. It was probably good to start, but as food truck vendors have been operating, it's really been a burden not just to get the license, but once they go through all of that process from the license collector to the streets department to the health department, getting their fire suppression license, and they actually try to go out and vend, they have ran into a lot of hiccups. So I know it's important for this board and also this committee to cut red tape. And with working with the Institute of Justice as well as the Food Truck Association, we identified these 3 ways that we can try to make it a little easier for food trucks to be able to operate. And with that, I would close for any questions from the committee, unless it's people here to speak.
Yes, Alderman, you read my mind. Madam Clerk, do we have anyone signed up for public comment or testify? Well,
We have no one signed up for public comment.
is there anybody here that would like to sign up for public comment? Okay. With that, I will turn it over committee to ask questions.
Okay, Alderwoman, we have one person who just raised their hand.
Okay, let's go ahead and hear public comment, and then I've got some questions for you, so don't worry. Don't go too far. Okay. Do you want to put them on?
Ms. McDonald, could you unmute your mic and turn on your camera? Okay, there she is.
And if you could, before we get started, Ms. McDonald, I know you've testified before, but if you could raise your right hand and swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. And you'll have 3 minutes, Madam Clerk?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. My name for the record is Jennifer McDonald with the Institute for Justice. I direct a program called Cities Work, where we partner with cities across the country to help them identify and then rectify some of the regulatory barriers that make entrepreneurship inaccessible, particularly folks from BIPOC and lower income communities. So we have worked with this committee for the past year or so now to help reduce some of the red tape that entrepreneurs faced, and that, of course, includes food trucks. So we've been working with Alderman Aldridge on this bill, and we fully support everything in it, particularly eliminating the vending districts and the 150-foot proximity ban for all of the reasons that the Alderman already stated. We think putting these new laws in place is going to do a lot to really promote not only food trucks in St. Louis, but like the Alderman mentioned, bring more foot traffic to areas with restaurants and bars and other local businesses. So we think everybody wins with a bill like this. We also wanted to suggest a couple of amendments that could make the bill go even farther. And I've talked to the Alderman about this, and we'd like to keep working on it, but we wanted to just mention it in the public hearing. So one of the things that we'd like to explore getting rid of is also the 300-foot proximity ban for fairs and festivals. So to allow food trucks to vend within 300 feet of a fair or a festival for the same reasons that we want them to be able to vend within 150 feet of restaurants or other trucks. We've also heard a lot from the trucks about the $500 fee that vendors have to pay to get a permit from the streets department. And that is just, it's really, really high and unusual from what we've seen across the country. And so we would like to explore either reducing that fee, or perhaps there's something that can be done to combine the permits between the streets department and the license collector. Maybe if we can reduce the number of permits that trucks have to apply for, it'll be easier for them to get licensed, and we'll also lower those permit fees for them and hopefully reduce the staff time required to process those permits as well. So there's some cost savings for the city there as well. Right now, trucks, there isn't really a mechanism for trucks to be able to vend on private property, even though they can be fully licensed to sell on public property, on public streets. There isn't really a way for a private property owner to bring them onto their property for a special event without really applying for a conditional use permit. And so that process is incredibly burdensome and expensive. And so we would urge the committee to amend the bill to make it possible for trucks and private property owners to enter their own negotiations to participate in special events and things like that together. Since the trucks are already fully licensed, there isn't really a health and safety argument not to do that. So we'd encourage you to consider that. And then we'd also encourage you to consider eliminating the requirement to get a conditional use permit if trucks want to use a restaurant's kitchen to prepare their food as opposed to a commissary kitchen. Again, there just isn't really a regulatory mechanism for that without a conditional use permit. And so that whole process gets really expensive and really time consuming. And so since both the trucks and the license,
I'm sorry, Ms.
restaurants-
McDonald, that's your time.
Oh, sorry, just the restaurants and the trucks are fully licensed, so we think they should be able to work together. But we'd happy to answer any questions that the committee might have, and we really look forward to continuing to work with you all on this issue.
Thank you, Ms. McDonald. And it looks like we have somebody else online who'd like to testify.
Dan Pister.
Mr. Pister, if you could just raise your right hand. And do you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Yeah, thank you for having me and giving me the opportunity to speak at the meeting. I'm Dan Pister. I'm a longtime downtown resident. I'm also chair of the Downtown Neighborhood Association. So I have a pretty wide net who I'm speaking with downtown as far as renters, residents, condo owners, and small businesses. And just wanted to convey some concerns about the bill, many of which we've already voiced before, but I think it's important to get them on the record. First and foremost, food trucks are allowed, and some of the street vendors that we currently have that are already downtown vend till late in the evenings, and we've seen some issues that have come up around some of these vendors. We get large groups of people that are congregating around the vendors after they've been drinking all night, and obviously everybody's a little bit louder than they usually are after a night of drinking. And we have residents that live on the second, third, fourth floors of these buildings that are right above them, and the noises can be disturbing for some of the residents that we have downtown. So the provision in this bill allows vendors and food trucks to go till 2 a.m. So that's one of our concerns. We would, rather see the vendor end time moved up a little bit earlier in the evening, maybe till 11 p.m. or midnight, to kind of alleviate some of the concerns that we've had in the past, and some of the concerns that could develop from late night vending. And then obviously some of the businesses, more food trucks, more vendors could create more foot traffic. However, in theory that sounds great, but there are some complementary businesses that would work well, different types of restaurants that serve different types of food. But our concern is for some of the existing ones. There's nothing that stops a taco truck from opening up right in front of an existing brick and mortar Hispanic restaurant that serves the same fare. So that could be an unfair disadvantage that some of the people that poured a lot of money in their brick and mortar restaurants that they would have to contend with now going forward. And that also on top of all the other challenges it is running a small business. So what I would ask is for the people in the committee and the sponsor to take a look at those two items, especially the hours of operation for the vending and the proximity to current restaurants, and maybe institute some sort of proximity so they're not right outside some of the existing restaurants, and see if those modifications can occur in the bill. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Madam Clerk, is there anyone else on your list to testify?
No, that concludes the online commentary.
Great. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Then I will go to my colleagues on the committee, starting with Vice Chair Oldenburg. Do you have any questions for Alderman Aldrich?
I do not. No questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Alderwoman Spencer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to say on the front end how excited I am to see some more, like a path for more food trucks in the city. I think it's really important. I also especially the sponsor, have some concerns about the restaurant community. I think it might be helpful. I am committed to kind of having some
Excuse me,
conversations and
Alderwoman
kind of trying to
Spencer.
work out.
You need to have your camera
Yes?
on. You need your camera
Oh,
on.
okay. My apologies. I was kind of caught off guard here picking my son up from school. So I'm in the car. So I just wanted to say that I really commend the effort here. I think food trucks are, as the sponsor pointed out, a really vital part of vibrant cities. and they're incredibly important. I just want to make sure too that we have the restaurant community and the, everybody on board with the solution that works for everybody. So I'm excited that we're continuing to have this conversation. And don't really have a question. I just wanted to kind of weigh in on that front. Thank you for the hearing and for the opportunity.
Thank you, Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Narayan.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I agree with Alderman Aldridge that when we passed this bill, it was just too restrictive. It's put us in a place where we're frankly behind St. Louis County and St. Charles County when it comes to food trucks. I know food truck operators who don't bother to get licensed in the city because of both the expense of getting licensed in the city and then the fact that there's nowhere really to vend, with very few exceptions. I think that it's important that we get the push-pull between brick and mortar restaurants and food trucks right, though. I've worked with both food trucks and restaurants. I have friends that have food trucks. I have friends that own restaurants. I think we need to really hammer down on what an appropriate distance is. I think also one of the interesting things that I took from the conversation that we had in this committee regarding food trucks was that there are some brick and mortar establishments that would like to have food trucks present, particularly after they're closed or on days that their kitchen is not. I should say after their kitchen is closed or on days that their kitchen is not open, to give the food trucks an additional opportunity, and B, to keep people coming into their establishments and just being able to go and grab food from whatever truck is there. So I think we could probably carve out something in any distance requirement that we impose. We could probably carve out something with written permission from the brick and mortar establishment that it would be kind of infringing upon. In the current legislation, I also know that there's an issue in regard to density of trucks. I think that that's a clear mistake at this point. I think most of the time when people are looking at food truck events, the density of the food trucks are one of the things that kind of pushes them to that. So I know if there was an area of town that had kind of denser food trucks, I think it would thrive. We see that in Tower Grove with Food Truck Friday. I think for me, it's not a question of is this legislation necessary. Really, the only thing that I think we need to be focusing on in the updating of this is what is the appropriate distance from a brick and mortar restaurant, because or else we're going to see an issue where food trucks are putting brick and mortar places in a bad predicament because the margins are so thin anyway. When we introduce a competitor directly in front of them, it may be a real issue. So I look forward to working with the sponsor on the nuance there. But I think we're really headed in the right direction with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Narayan. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Thank you so much, and thank you to the sponsor for bringing this forward. I agree with all the comments that have been made thus far about now us being able to come and circle back and get this right. I hate to put her on the spot, but I've worked with her as well on some of this, so I don't know if our representative from the Business Assistance Center had any general information she wanted to share and be captured in the meeting today, or if you just want to be here for questions, it's up to you. But if you had something, because I know how passionate you are with this subject, I wouldn't want you to miss the opportunity to share it again and have it captured in this hearing today. Yeah, I was gonna try to
you, Kelly.
repeat what you said, but then it got.
During
But
last
can I,
year,
do I have to swear you, do I have to swear you in? I guess I do. Can you, obviously raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. And if you could just state your name and your role for the people at home and also for our colleagues.
Yes, my name is Kelly Croy, and I work at the Business Assistance Center in St. Louis City Hall for St. Louis Development Corporation. And a couple weeks ago, when we had the first hearing, I really outlined what my experience has been with food truck owners and the red tape that they've been experiencing on trying to make a profit in St. Louis City. And as other aldermen have mentioned, many choose to just say it's not worth it to come to St. Louis City because of the restrictions that we have that the other counties don't. Not a lot has changed in the last 2 weeks, so I don't want to recap everything that went on, but the biggest hurdles for the food truck owners is that they are not allowed to vend on any public street, whether it is in front of City Hall where we don't have any food options here, like at a meter, or whether it is in a parking lot outside of Edward Jones. We don't have a clear-cut way to tell them that this is what they're allowed to do in this city. And so I think that these bills are doing a great job at moving forward in order to give food trucks a way to legally park and make money in St. Louis, because right now I can tell them how to get licensed, but once they have their license, it isn't good for very much unless you're invited to one of these events, such as Food Truck Friday or the Taste of St. Louis, or something where you're invited and you pay a fee to go there as well. So anything to make it more accessible for everybody and bring more food diversity to St. Louis would be great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I appreciate you. And I also will say it again that I appreciate your passion with this and how you've worked tirelessly with so many of the vendors. Patiently with so many of them as well. You have a gift for that. So, I think my mic might have left.
Looking forward to the change.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'm looking forward to the change too. So just offering, to be here 100% at the table, helping to come to the median. I share some of the sentiments that Alderman Ryan said, and I just hope that we will be able to find that cohesiveness and that collaboration between our brick and mortars and our food trucks, because the reality of the comparison, and this is a choice, I say it all the time, and we want to make sure that we do our part to promote the choice to come down and do business in the city, right? And so we know we have a responsibility on both ends, but we also know that we want to be able to work together for the betterment of all of us for the greater good. So thank you again for bringing this forward. I look forward to continuing to work with you and the rest of my colleagues for the best practices for everyone.
Thank you, Alder Lady. Alderwoman Keys.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. I do not have any questions, but I would like to be a co-sponsor.
So noted.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderwoman. Alderwoman Sanier.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Hello, Alderman.
How you doing, Alder Lady?
Good. I'm really excited to see us moving forward and talking about it. One of the things that has really surprised me since becoming alder and building, so many more relationships with business owners, whether it's the South Grand City or the Cherokee City, it's just how many businesses really start as food trucks, and like their success and their ability to get stable economically and develop their clientele base and work out their products. To do that in food trucks and be successful is a lot of times the big decision maker on whether or not their business will grow and expand. And I certainly feel like, especially for business owners who don't come from either like recycled wealth, or maybe we're at a harder point when they were deciding to venture out into entrepreneurship, folks of color, that us getting this right is really, really important. I would, say the same things as Alderwoman Clark Hubbard and Alderman Narayan. I think I plan on going to the Cherokee City and having conversations with them specifically about your legislation. I've already forwarded the frequently asked questions document that you made to them, so I just appreciate you and putting the work in that. Have you found when you were working on this, did you find in other cities and other places, do they have vending districts or, where is St. Louis City in terms of like, even the county, like in terms of how we do this and what restrictions we have in place versus other places in our region and other places wider?
Yeah, so this is a new field for me, myself. So I've also learned in this process, and I will also commend you all, the Red Tape, for having these conversations, knowing that this legislation that was worked on, as I've worked with the Institute, as I've worked with food trucks to learn more about this. What I have learned is we in St. Louis probably have a lot more requirements just our friends a few west in St. Louis County. Like Alderman Orion said, it's so much easier because they don't have, on top of the districts, then you have these requirements of like where you can vend outside of restaurants. And I think, that's going to be a ongoing conversation, what that looks like. But in my time of doing research and even in the FAQ, like I said, when you click on the study, the Institute of Justice have done a study from another city of how these food trucks that, sit outside of restaurants, not like directly, but I can just think of like when Greater St. Louis Inc., they do their food truck events on Wednesdays, it's right outside, sauce on the side, there's a few feet, but it's not that 150 feet. So it still gives people that option that either want to go into a brick and mortar to sit down, have a pizza, a beer, or, on lunch break and they got to do a quick bite and go to a food truck. But in that study, you'll see that actually with having those food trucks close to those restaurants, it has brought more foot traffic, it has brought more diversity, it's brought more energy around those areas where people say, well, I can go into a brick and mortar, sit down, and maybe come outside and grab something from a food truck or vice versa. But we haven't seen any negative. And I know, each city's different. Sometimes what works for Cincinnati or what works for Seattle may not work for St. Louis. But in the studies and trying to find how food trucks have had a negative impact on brick and mortars, we just haven't been able to find it. But we have found how they have had a positive, like you said, a lot of people before they even can get a brick and mortar, especially our Black and brown communities, have the ability to get a food truck. And it ain't cheap to just do that, but they get a food truck and they're able to raise their money till they get a brick and mortar. And then we see a lot of brick and mortars also have food trucks, where sometimes they don't have the restaurant open, like the Alderman said, but they have their food truck right outside that restaurant. So it is, honestly, it's only been positive, but not to take away any concerns or things that we want to make sure we do right in St. Louis. But I will say that we are a little behind from when we last did this ordinance around food trucks to put them on the market, where St. Louis County and St. Charles County are superseding us with not so many regulations. They are opening up their doors to say, come do business in St. Louis County and in St. Charles County. We are too, but we just have a few more regulations that make it harder for people that's just trying to get their foot in the door and start an operation.
Thank you. I think the other point that will be a popular topic with your bill is the extension of the hours. I know on Cherokee, something that some of the business owners have started to do actually is they open up like a late night window. So it's like a much limited kitchen, food option, but it's because we've actually found that there is a market and a demand of folks who are leaving from going to other events, and especially summer, but whether it was a concert or whatever the case may be, where they want to come back and get some food. And I've gotten reports that those are doing, really well. So I was just wondering to the person who gave public comment earlier saying, the concern, I guess, kind of a public safety concern that they were phrasing with going into later hours. Could you just speak to that point? How do you feel that having businesses within the later parts of the evening or earlier mornings, that the impact that may have?
Yeah. I know Mr. Pister, good friend. I know with DNA, and I know he's a staunch advocate for his community and for the downtown community. And I think it's one of those maybe ongoing conversations because, downtown is unique. It is entertainment district because, things happen after hours, but there are also residents that, you know, live maybe above some of these establishments. And maybe the time could look different for the downtown compared to a place like you say that is Cherokee Street, where residential is a little more further, like not right there in the middle, or over by Tower Grove, where, you know, they're in the park, but they're not by residential. So I do think there is a benefit to extending hours, because I know even after hours on Washington, you know, some restaurants close down, and maybe on the weekend. Not trying to paint everybody with a broad brush, but there are people that just want to go downtown, have a good time, not cause any problems, and a restaurant is closed. And, you know, maybe they've had a drink and they need something to put in their system, and being able to have a food truck that is there operating when the restaurant closed, I think only makes people excited to want to come downtown. It's a lot of good stuff going on. And I think this could be, once we find that perfect medium, could only be a benefit to ensuring once a restaurant is closed, how to make sure that, you know, a food truck can be there to also offer food to people who just left a, I don't know, a Miley Cyrus concert or a Battlehawks game or whatever it is, a Cardinals game, and they walk in north and a restaurant is closed and there could be a food truck right there.
For sure. I also think, to me, I think that, you know, obviously public safety involves a lot, but when you have a lot of people and a lot more activity, you usually have less crime and activity. So I wonder, I don't want to speak for a community that I don't represent, but I know that's one of the reasons why on Cherokee we began to entertain the idea of having some of the businesses go a little later into the evening, because we would observe behaviors that are maybe not even technically illegal because of our state, but bother people, whether that's people walking with firearms or just activities that make people uncomfortable. And we're curious, if we were to support people being here a little bit later, how would that look? So I think that should be a part of the conversation. My last question is just to, I was just looking through your FAQ document, and you have a specific point, and I really just wanted you to just make it on record. But I think at the end, you pretty much just talk about kind of the summary and a lot about the context of where it came into play. Some of our older colleagues might be more helpful. I'm not sure what the context was when the ordinance came in, but I was just imagining that as we go back to our communities and have these conversations, I'm sure it will come up, you know, you guys moved in this direction before, you're moving in this direction now. And I know you've done a lot of like talking to different people. We did the listening sessions. Can you talk a little bit about just the different, why would we be going in a different direction than we went when we passed that alderman? I'm saying we, knowing three of us were not a part of those.
Yeah, I wouldn't say we going in a different direction. I think, you know, anytime we do legislation, there are unintended consequences, good and bad. And we always have to come back and make sure that we may have an idea, but once it actually goes into law and you have different departments and, you know, they're understaffed and don't have a lot of staff to manage all this, I don't think we started a bad direction when we passed this ordinance. I think it was Alderwoman Spencer. I think what we were trying to do is put food trucks on the market because other cities had done it and St. Louis hasn't. And I think we've had enough time to see, unfortunately, at the risk of some business owners of just struggling to try to go through the process. But I think we've got enough personal stories. If we don't always have data, but personal stories of individuals that have been here, personal stories from people who have food trucks in other areas that have been able to tell us how we can go further. I think the original piece of legislation was a start. I think this will be a continuing, and, you know, 5 years down the line, we may figure out that we need to either go further or we probably need to scale back. But I think this is a progress on where the city has started, and knowing that we are behind, I think it's a great opportunity for us to be innovative and catch up to make sure that we keep people wanting to do business here in the city of St. Louis and not want to go to St. Louis County or St. Charles, and let business owners and food trucks know that, you know, we want their service, and more importantly, not their service, we want to support them in being an entrepreneur, because, you know, it's a lot of money that I've from personal stories that they're investing in these food trucks and all these different permits, and then they get it and then they realize, well, I actually can't do what I thought I was going to be able to do, because this is just, like I say in front of us, this is just the downtown district where they're not required. There are about, I think, 7 other in the bill that we got rid of, where you go to different spots where they just can't because of the requirements we put in place. I think looking out for brick and mortars, absolutely. But I do think there's a fine line of being able to support our brick and mortars and food trucks. I think the 150 feet radius right now isn't working because it's nowhere that they really can vend. You know, I know Alderman Orion brought up maybe like an agreement with the restaurant, but we have to do something to make it a little easier for them. And I think what we're doing is just progress off of the previous legislation that was passed.
Excellent. I just want to thank Alderwoman Spencer for bringing that original ordinance forward. I do think her intention was to allow them.
I
and
could be wrong. I believe it was Alderwoman Spencer. I don't know if she's still.
Yeah, I think it was. But I think it's great too that she's on this committee, and so as things move forward, she will be a part of that conversation ongoingly. Thank you. That's all of my questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderwoman Sunier. Thank you, Alderman Aldrich, for bringing this bill forward. I know that you put in a lot of work, and I think I'm going to use my eyes here, but I think I've learned a tremendous amount in just the few listening sessions we have, and frankly, the food truck listening session. I think I was a little bit aghast, and it opened up my eyes onto what entrepreneurs were experiencing. So just a couple quick questions for you. Can you just kind of outline if you've talked to any departments and about this bill and kind of what the feedback has been?
Yeah, so this one, not much so on the departments. There is another piece of legislation that I'm looking at for as the licensees that I think requires more of the department end. So outside of them being able to vend, we know from the listening session when they have to get their license, that's a license collector. This bill wouldn't affect the license collector. The Department of Streets, it wouldn't, but it would with the Department of Streets because they get their license for 500 or be able to get the 500 for the streets department. But even with some of these areas that are in the white, it's kind of conflicting messaging of where they can be able to vend, as well as the fire suppression would need to talk with them. But this one is not so much, I would say, I need a department conversation. I am going to be in communication with the mayor's office so that they can just be aware of it. But this is just trying to kind of lift some regulations of where they're able to, after they done went through all the departments, to be able to get the necessary licenses that they need.
Great. No, thank you for that clarification. And as I understand it, this bill only applies to trucks and not necessarily it applies to sidewalk vendors as
Correct.
well? Okay. And so those areas around like the convention center and Busch Stadium there's still no food truck vendors or sidewalk vendors allowed? No.
Correct.
Okay. And then just one thing I saw, and can you just explain a little bit, talk through, it looks like some neighborhoods are excluded. Did I read that right?
Yes, there are some neighborhoods that are excluded. There are some neighborhoods that have, like in the downtown area, have certain areas where they can vend. If you give me a little second, I could point to you on the page of where all the differing districts are. If you start on page 2 of the bill, I mean, there's different districts from downtown to City Park to Merrimack Street. There's Midtown, Tiffany, Covenant Blue, Grand Center. And then on top of those, certain districts have certain requirements that are different from this district and that requirement. So even with having all these different districts, there is not even just a overlap of like similar requirements. So if we did have all these, and it's like, I want to go to Merrimack, you know, that requirement's different from what downtown requirement is. Downtown has their own kind of special district themselves alone, which we would be eliminating that one too. But outside of the districts, there are excluded from neighborhoods too. And like I say, I know when we have things in St. Louis, luckily St. Louis Place isn't one of those that are excluded. But, you know, when we have our Juneteenth festival or our African Festival that's put on right across the street from Crown Candy, which that's a restaurant right there, but there's food trucks, you know, it's vibrant. And I think it brings a level of excitement for neighborhood because a food truck is just kind of this different energy, right? You get to wait on your food, you get to talk to your neighbors or somebody next to you, you get to really enjoy the moment. But it would eliminate the requirement for districts and as well as neighborhoods.
But then, okay, so that's helpful, but it looks like, if I'm reading it right, there's no food truck vending LRA property or just in general in Kingsway East, Kingsway West, Penrose, and Mark Twain. Is that right? That we don't
is
allow
correct.
any kind of vending, any kind of mobile vending, any kind of sidewalk vending in that part of the city?
Correct.
Okay. Well, I don't have any other questions for you. I would also, Madam Clerk, like to be added as a co-sponsor bill. And with that,
Alderman Oldenburg is online.
oh, Alderman Oldenburg, you've got a question? Alderman Oldenburg? Okay, while we're waiting, I'm gonna send it to Alderwoman.
I just wanted to see if Miss McDonald was still on, and if she was, I think she finished her thoughts, but if she didn't, I was gonna ask her if she could email those to us, the ones she stated, and if there was any additional one. Miss McDonald, one of the first speaker,
From the Institute of Justice.
she's still on. Okay, so hopefully she heard me.
What are you looking for?
I wanted to see if she was able to finish her thoughts, because remember, time was up. I think she finished her thoughts, but if she didn't, I wanted to ask her to email for our records. Okay, written comments, not only what she stated, but if there were any additional thoughts she had.
And I will say on the FAQ in the drive, like I say, there's 2 hyperlinks. When you click on that hyperlink from the study, it's a very comprehensive. I didn't do a good job of going deep in detail of everything, but that was provided by Ms. McDonald, Institute of Justice, of just talking about the benefits of food trucks and the benefits of how food trucks and brick and mortars have worked together in other cities. So when you click on that link, you'll be able to also see their full report that they did on food trucks.
Great. Well, I don't have anything else. Alderman Aldrich, anything else for the committee or for?
No, just thank
record.
everybody on this committee for input. Like I say, not asking for a vote right now. Hopefully, maybe next 2 weeks, I'll work with the chair, or if not next week, we'll figure it out. But my goal is really, I appreciate the listening sessions that you have been doing. Want to make sure that this isn't being rushed, because I also agree with the alderman from the 4th. I don't think it's a question if is this the right thing to do, but just how do we make it right so we don't have too many unintended consequences. We still may have to come back and change it, but there's a lot of input given that I appreciate. I just want to also echo again, me and the alderwoman from the 6th is looking at the processes before they actually get a food truck, how to make that a lot easier. I know Ms. McDonald talked about the $500 from the streets and the kind of conditional use for the trucks. I do think that's also important to have like maybe a separate bill on how to streamline some of those licensees. And this is more on the after effect. Once they get the license, how do we make the process for them to operate just easy and fluent where they don't have to go to a different city. And thank you to my colleagues and look forward to working with you all and getting input on the legislation.
Thank you, Alderman. So with that, is there any written testimony?
We have none.
Great. Any announcements? Announcements? Okay. I think, Madam Clerk, was everybody here at some point in some capacity?
Yes.
Okay, so nobody needs to be excused. Great. Well, with that, with no announcements or anything else, I will entertain a moment, or not a moment, I'm sorry. I'm having a moment. I will entertain a moment to adjourn, a motion to adjourn. And we're done. Thank you.